6 months with no nanny, until the Apache woman told the rancher, "I'm here now." The sun had barely begun its climb over the wide-open fields when the rancher stepped outside, rubbing his tired eyes. 6 months. 6 months of handling everything alone. Branch, the children, the animals. Every single responsibility fell squarely on his shoulders. And the truth was, he was beginning to feel like he couldn't keep up. He took a deep breath of the cool morning air, trying to steel himself for the day ahead. There were chores waiting in every corner, meals to prepare, and little eyes that watched him closely, expecting him to have all the answers. Break. Inside, the house was quiet, but not peaceful. The silence was the kind that pressed against the walls and reminded him of the chaos that could erupt at any moment. His children were still asleep, their small breaths steady, but he knew that once they woke there would be questions, demands, and messes waiting for him. He had done this every morning for months, but today felt heavier. Maybe it was because the past 6 months had started to blur together, each day a repetition of exhaustion and struggle. He walked toward the barn first. The animals needed tending. Horses whinnied softly as he approached, and he tried to greet them with the same calm voice he used every day. "Morning, Daisy. Morning, Jack," he murmured as he opened the stalls. The routine was familiar, almost comforting, but it also reminded him of the life he had chosen, and the life he was barely managing. He brushed the horses carefully, checked their water, and gave them feed, all the while thinking about the small disasters waiting for him inside the house. By the time he returned, the kitchen was already calling him. He had to make breakfast, pack lunches, and make sure the children were ready for school or the day's activities. He moved through each task with practiced efficiency, but the weight of fatigue tugged at him. Sometimes he wondered if anyone truly understood how hard it was. The neighbors were kind, yes, but they didn't live with him. They didn't see the tiny battles waged in the living room over breakfast cereal spilled on the floor, or socks that mysteriously disappeared into thin air. Breath when the children finally appeared, rubbing sleep from their eyes. The rancher felt both relief and a surge of anxiety. "Good morning," he said, trying to sound cheerful, though his voice carried a subtle strain. The children smiled, their small faces still innocent and trusting. It was moments like these that made the struggle worth it, yet he couldn't ignore the growing sense that he was stretched too thin. Each child demanded attention in different ways. One wanted stories, another needed help with a small task, and both had a knack for turning even the simplest morning into a whirlwind. Breakfast was a test of patience. One child dropped a piece of toast, another spilled juice, and the rancher found himself scrambling to clean while trying not to raise his voice. "Careful, please!" "Watch your step," he said repeatedly, feeling the familiar sting of frustration. He loved his children dearly, but these small incidents reminded him that the days were long and his energy reserves were low. By the time breakfast was over, he felt drained, yet he had no time to rest. The ranch didn't wait for exhaustion, and neither did the children. After breakfast, he turned to the house chores. Laundry, dishes, cleaning, the list never ended. He moved from room to room, performing each task with care, yet always with an underlying urgency. Time was never on his side. He glanced at the clock frequently, calculating how much time he had before needing to tend to the animals again or prepare for the day's errands. Each tick of the clock seemed louder than the last, echoing in his mind like a drumbeat he could not escape. The day outside offered no relief either. The sun rose higher, bringing heat and a reminder of the work that still awaited in the fields. Crops needed tending, fences needed mending, and the animals required constant attention. He worked tirelessly, moving between tasks, barely pausing to wipe the sweat from his brow. Sometimes he paused to watch the horizon, longing for a moment of calm, but the reality of responsibility pressed him forward. There was no pause button on this life. By midday, fatigue had settled deep into his bones. His arms ached from lifting, his back throbbed from bending, and yet he had to continue. He thought back over the past 6 months, wondering how he had managed this long without help. He remembered the early days, filled with hope that the situation would improve quickly, only to find that plans fell through and assistance never came. Every promise of help had evaporated, leaving him to navigate the endless days alone. His children played nearby in the yard, their laughter echoing against the walls of the house. The sound should have lifted his spirits, but instead it reminded him of his limitations. He wanted to be everywhere at once, to keep the ranch in order, to teach his children, to protect them, and still find a moment for himself. It was impossible. He sighed heavily, feeling the weight of 6 months of relentless work pressing down on him. The afternoon brought new challenges. One of the horses was restless, the children needed snacks, and the wind picked up dust from the dry fields, adding another layer of discomfort. He moved quickly, fixing fences, calming the animals, and attending to the children's needs, but the exhaustion was catching up. Every step felt heavier, every task longer. He wondered if he could sustain this pace indefinitely. The thought of continuing alone for months longer was almost unbearable. The evenings were no easier.
Dinner preparation, bathing the children, putting them to bed. It was a routine that demanded constant attention. He often found himself awake long after the children had fallen asleep, completing tasks that had piled up during the day.
He looked at the empty house, the quiet that followed the chaos, and felt a pang of loneliness. The work was fulfilling in its own way, but the isolation was profound. 6 months had passed, and he was still waiting for relief that never came. Sometimes he would imagine what life could be like with help. A partner, a friend, someone who could share the burdens and lighten the constant pressure. The thought brought both hope and despair. Hope because it could be possible. Despair because he wasn't sure if he would ever find such help. He shook his head, trying to push the thought aside. He had always been independent, proud of his ability to handle anything, but even pride could not shield him from fatigue, breath. But sleep was never deep or restful. He would lie awake, listening to the wind, thinking of the next day, the tasks he had yet to complete, the children he needed to guide, the animals he had to care for. His mind rarely stopped racing, and even in rest, his body remained tense, ready to spring into action at any sound or disturbance. And yet, despite everything, he remained steadfast. There was a determination in him that refused to give in. He would continue to rise each morning, face the challenges of the day, and care for his children and his land. But deep inside, he knew that something had to change. 6 months of managing alone had brought him to his limits, and the question lingered. How much longer could he sustain this life without help? He looked out over the fields one last time before heading to bed. The stars twinkled above, a silent witness to his struggle, and he whispered a quiet wish for assistance, for a break, for a hand to share the weight. Little did he know that the help he needed was closer than he imagined, and that a new presence in his life would soon arrive, bringing not just relief, but guidance, strength, and a gentle wisdom that would change everything. As he closed his eyes, exhausted but determined, he could not have known that tomorrow would bring the first step toward a transformation he had been longing for. An unexpected arrival that would begin to lift the weight of 6 long, trying months. The next morning dawned bright and clear, but the rancher felt the familiar weight of exhaustion pressing against him. 6 months had passed since he had last felt true relief, and every task, every responsibility still fell on him alone. He was in the barn, brushing the horses and checking the fences, when a sudden sound caught his attention. A soft, steady rhythm on the path leading to the house. At first he thought it might be a neighbor, but as he squinted toward the gate he saw a figure standing there, calm and upright, carrying a small bag. The woman was of medium height, with strong, quiet features, and her eyes held a depth that immediately made the rancher pause. There was a certainty in her presence, a quiet confidence that demanded attention without speaking a word.
He opened his mouth, intending to ask who she was, but before he could, she spoke first.
"I'm here now," she said, her voice steady and gentle. The words were simple, yet they carried a weight that made him stop in his tracks. She did not introduce herself formally, nor did she ask permission. She simply stated her presence, as if it were a fact the world had to acknowledge. The rancher felt a strange mixture of surprise and relief, though he did not yet understand why. He set down his brush and wiped his hands on a rag, studying her carefully. I'm not sure I understand," he said slowly. "Who are you? How did you get here?" "I can help," she replied simply. Breath.
I know what needs to be done. I'm ready to start.
Her words were plain, but they carried an unspoken promise. The rancher hesitated. Pride and skepticism battled within him. For 6 months he had managed everything alone. He had handled every crisis, every tantrum, every difficult day. He was capable, he told himself. And yet the exhaustion in his body, the constant tension in his mind, made him consider the impossible thought, perhaps he didn't have to do it all alone. "Come inside, then," he said finally, motioning toward the house. Breath. He kept his voice cautious. He did not know this woman, yet there was something about her calm certainty that made him believe she could actually help. The woman entered the house with quiet steps, as if she had been there many times before. She observed the surroundings carefully. The slightly messy living room, the scattered toys, the traces of a life lived in constant motion. But the rancher noticed the way her eyes seemed to take everything in without judgment, simply understanding. The children, still rubbing sleep from their eyes, paused in curiosity. Their small faces were filled with questions. New faces always were, but they were not afraid. The woman knelt down slowly to meet their gaze, smiling gently. "Good morning," she said. "I'm here to help." "I'll take care of things with you." It was a simple greeting, but something about the tone and the warmth in her eyes immediately put the children at ease. They looked at their father, then back at her, and a small spark of hope ignited. For the first time in months, the rancher felt a flicker of relief. Perhaps, just perhaps, the endless struggle might soon ease. She began by observing the routine quietly. She watched the rancher prepare breakfast, noticing the small ways he managed the chaos. She did not interfere, but her presence alone seemed to lighten the atmosphere. When the children spilled a cup of milk, she calmly fetched a cloth without scolding or comment. She seemed to understand instinctively how to bring order without forcing it. By the time breakfast was over, the rancher realized he had not felt this level of ease in months. The simple act of someone being there, someone competent, patient, and kind, was transforming the energy in the house. The woman moved with purpose but without hurry, tending to small tasks, noticing things he had long since overlooked, and gently guiding the children to cooperate without raising her voice.
After breakfast, they stepped outside together.
The ranch was vast, and the tasks were never-ending, but the woman seemed to know where to start. She inspected the fences with a careful eye, checking for weak spots that had been overlooked. She moved among the animals calmly, speaking softly to them, and they responded to her presence, as if they sensed her quiet authority. The rancher watched, astonished. He had never seen anyone manage the ranch in such a way. Efficiently, yet without rushing, gentle, yet firm. He realized that for 6 months he had been struggling not because he lacked skill, but because he lacked a partner. And now, someone had arrived. Someone who could take some of the weight off his shoulders.
During the day, the woman quietly revealed small glimpses of her wisdom.
She shared tips on handling the children's disagreements, taught them subtle ways to help around the ranch, and even offered little lessons on respecting the land and the animals.
She did not lecture or criticize. Instead, she guided with patience and quiet authority.
The rancher noticed how the children responded. They listened, they followed her instructions willingly, and they began to cooperate in ways they had not done in months. By the afternoon, the rancher found himself finally able to take a short break. He sat on the porch, watching the woman move among the animals and the children, and for the first time in months, he felt the tension in his shoulders loosen. There was a rhythm now, a flow to the day that had been missing. It was not perfect, but it was far better than the chaos he had endured alone.
He couldn't help but ask, "Where did you learn all this?"
Bree, how do you do it so calmly? The woman paused and looked at him, her eyes steady and thoughtful. I have experience, she said simply.
I have seen many households, many situations. I know what it takes to help, and I know that calm is stronger than force.
Her words were simple, but they carried truth. The rancher realized that her confidence was not arrogance, nor was it empty.
She had a skill, a knowledge, and a presence that went beyond mere labor. She had arrived not just to help with tasks, but to bring stability, understanding, and guidance.
Ban. As the sun began to dip toward the horizon, the rancher noticed something else. His children were laughing more freely than they had in months. They ran through the yard, chased the dogs, and even helped with small chores, encouraged gently by the woman. It was a scene of life and energy he had almost forgotten existed in his home. The day, which had begun like so many others with stress and exhaustion, was ending with laughter and calm. Psst. He felt a small, cautious hope growing inside him. For 6 months he had endured the impossible alone, wondering if he would ever find relief. Bess. And now, in a single morning, a presence had arrived that seemed to promise change. Psst. He did not fully understand how or why, but he sensed that his life and the lives of his children was about to shift in a meaningful way. That evening, as the children were tucked into bed by the woman, he stood quietly in the doorway, watching her work. She moved with such ease and care, handling the tasks he had struggled with for months, and yet doing it without a hint of strain or complaint. He felt gratitude welling inside him, deeper than he had felt in a long time. "Thank you," he said quietly, not wanting to disturb the peace she had created. She looked up briefly, offering a small, warm smile. "I'm here to help," she replied. "It is my purpose." The rancher nodded, understanding that her presence was more than just help. It was a change, a transformation that would reshape their daily life. For the first time in months, he allowed himself to believe that things could get better. That night, he lay awake, thinking of the day's events. He had faced the dawn with fatigue and the burden of 6 months of struggle. By dusk, he had witnessed patience, skill, and kindness enter his home in the form of a woman who had arrived quietly, yet with a presence that demanded recognition. He realized that his pride, while strong, had nearly blinded him to the possibility of help.
And now he understood that accepting assistance was not weakness, it was strength and wisdom.
The rancher closed his eyes with a sense of calm he had not known in half a year. Tomorrow would bring new challenges as it always did, but he was no longer alone. There was someone with skill, patience, and care who had stepped into his life, ready to share the burden and bring guidance. For the first time in months, he felt a flicker of hope, and with it, the possibility of a life where the weight of the world did not rest solely on his shoulders. And in the quiet darkness, he whispered a silent gratitude, knowing that this woman, stranger yet so familiar in her capability, was the answer he had been waiting for. She had come not to replace him, but to strengthen him, to guide, to support, and to bring the light of order and care into a life that had been darkened by endless struggle. The night was calm, the ranch peaceful, and the rancher for the first time in 6 months felt a sense of possibility. The arrival of the Apache woman had marked a turning point. Her quiet strength, her understanding, and her presence were more than assistance. They were a lifeline.
And the rancher knew that tomorrow and every day after would be different because of her.
Base days, and the rancher slowly began to notice changes in his home that he hadn't dared to hope for. The chaos that had filled every corner for 6 long months was now replaced with a rhythm, a quiet harmony that made life feel lighter. The Apache woman moved with ease through the ranch, handling tasks, guiding the children, and offering calm advice without ever making him feel inadequate. Her presence, steady and reassuring, seemed to lift invisible weights from his shoulders. One morning, the rancher was feeding the animals when he noticed her kneeling by the chickens, quietly gathering eggs. The children were nearby, laughing softly as she guided them to collect the eggs carefully, showing them how to handle the delicate shells. She spoke gently, with patience and clarity, and the children listened attentively. The rancher watched from a distance, a small smile tugging at his lips. He realized that the household had begun to feel like a team, each member contributing in their own way. For the first time, he allowed himself a short break, sitting on the porch with a cup of coffee that was still warm. The sun was climbing, casting golden light across the fields, and the ranch felt alive in a way it hadn't in months. The sounds of birds, the laughter of children, and the quiet clatter of chores being done created a soothing rhythm. He took a deep breath, feeling a sense of relief wash over him, and admitted quietly to himself that her arrival had already changed everything.
As the day unfolded, the rancher noticed how the Apache woman had a way of seeing things he had missed for years.
She fixed a broken fence with an efficiency and care he had not realized he lacked. She guided the children to help without turning it into a chore, teaching them responsibility while keeping their spirits high. Even the horses seemed calmer in her presence, responding to her soft words and confident handling. It was as if her energy had woven itself into the very fabric of the ranch. The rancher began to talk to her more that day, not just about chores, but about life on the ranch, about the children, and even about himself. "You make it look so easy," he said, brushing his hands against the fence. "But how do you manage it all so calmly?" She paused and looked at him, her expression thoughtful. "It is not magic," she replied.
It is understanding. When you know the people, the animals, and the land, you can guide them instead of forcing them.
Calmness comes from patience, and patience comes from knowing your limits and respecting them.
He considered her words, realizing they carried more truth than he had expected.
For months, he had been running himself ragged, believing that only hard work and constant action could keep the ranch going. He now saw that he had been missing something essential: balance. Her presence taught him that strength was not just physical. It was measured in understanding, patience, and careful guidance.
Later, as they repaired a section of fencing together, a sudden problem arose.
One of the younger horses had injured its leg, a small but painful wound that required immediate attention. The rancher felt his usual surge of panic rise in his chest. He had dealt with emergencies before, but the timing was never easy. The woman stepped forward calmly, examining the horse with careful hands.
"Don't worry," she said softly, looking at him. "We can handle this together." Her confidence was contagious.
The rancher followed her instructions, holding the horse steady while she cleaned the wound and applied a bandage. The children watched, curious but calm, absorbing the quiet order of the scene. The rancher felt a wave of gratitude. Here was someone who not only eased his workload, but also helped him face unexpected challenges with composure. But he realized that with her by his side, even emergencies were no longer overwhelming. As the afternoon sun began to dip toward the horizon, the rancher and the Apache woman walked across the fields, checking the fences one last time. The children were inside, helping prepare an early dinner, their laughter echoing faintly through the house. He looked at her and felt a sense of trust he hadn't experienced in months, perhaps in years. She had arrived as a stranger, yet now she felt like someone he could rely on completely.
"You've changed this place," he said quietly.
Desperate. Not just the chores of the house, but everything. The children are calmer, the animals are happier, and I feel lighter. She smiled softly, brushing a strand of hair from her face. I only guided what was already here. You worked hard for this ranch, for your family.
I only helped them see what you already built. Her humility struck him.
She was powerful not through force but through gentle wisdom. He realized that strength could take many forms, and that sometimes the strongest people were those who could inspire and guide rather than push and demand. Over the next few days, the rancher noticed that even his own attitude began to shift. He was less anxious, more patient, and more observant. He found himself listening to her advice and following her guidance without feeling his pride wounded. The children were thriving, happily participating in chores and enjoying their days with laughter instead of the constant tension that had marked the past 6 months. One evening, as the sun painted the sky in shades of orange and pink, the rancher and the Apache woman sat quietly on the porch. The work was done for the day, the children were asleep, and the ranch was finally still. He sipped his water, watching her silhouette against the fading light.
I can't believe how much difference you've made, he said softly.
It's not just the chores. It's everything. The house, the ranch, the children, and me. She looked at him with steady eyes. You did this long before I arrived. I only helped make it easier. Even the strongest people need support sometimes.
Her words resonated deeply with him.
For months, he had believed that asking for help was weakness. Now he realized it was a form of strength, a recognition that no one could do everything alone. Her presence had taught him the value of partnership, trust, and patience. The following days were marked by small but meaningful routines. The children eagerly participated in chores, guided by her gentle instruction. The rancher found moments to rest and observe rather than constantly manage. Both. He noticed the subtle changes in the children, their confidence growing, their laughter freer, their willingness to help without being asked. It was as if her influence had created a ripple of calm and competence throughout the household. During one particularly busy morning, a neighbor stopped by, curious about the changes at the ranch. They watched as the Apache woman moved effortlessly among the children and animals, guiding tasks with quiet authority. The neighbor commented on how well organized and peaceful everything seemed. The rancher felt a quiet pride, realizing that this harmony was the result of shared effort, not just his own work. By midweek, the rancher recognized a profound truth. Life could be demanding and unpredictable, yet with the right support, even the heaviest burdens could feel manageable. He had spent 6 months struggling alone, and now, with her guidance, the weight on his shoulders had lifted. He could breathe again, think clearly, and even enjoy moments of quiet reflection he had long forgotten. One evening, as they closed the barn doors together, he felt a surge of gratitude he could not fully express.
I don't know how to thank you, he admitted.
You don't need to, she replied softly. Seeing this family thrive is thanks enough.
Her words, simple yet profound, filled him with warmth.
He realized that the bond they had formed went beyond practical help. It was built on trust, respect, and a shared commitment to the well-being of his family. For the first time in months, he felt hope, confidence, and a sense of possibility for the future. That night, as he lay in bed, he thought of the day's events. He remembered the calm authority she had shown, the quiet guidance she offered the children, and the strength she demonstrated during the unexpected challenges. He realized that her arrival had not only transformed the ranch, but also changed him.
He was no longer the exhausted, overwhelmed man he had been 6 months ago.
He was stronger, calmer, and more patient, learning that leadership and care could coexist. He understood that this transformation was just the beginning. With her by his side, the ranch, the children, and he himself could continue to grow and thrive. He allowed himself a rare smile in the darkness, feeling a sense of gratitude and relief that had been missing for months. The future no longer seemed like a series of endless struggles. It was a path he could navigate with support, trust, and newfound confidence. Breaking. And in the quiet of the night, he whispered a silent promise to himself: to honor the guidance and support that had been given, to nurture the bond forming in his home, and to ensure that his children grew up surrounded by the patience, understanding, and care that he had learned to embrace. The Apache woman had arrived quietly, yet her presence had sparked a transformation that would shape their lives for years to come.
Morning came gently over the ranch, painting the sky with soft shades of pink and gold.
The rancher woke earlier than usual, not because of exhaustion, but because of a quiet anticipation he hadn't felt in months. He moved through the house, now orderly and calm, noticing the subtle changes that had taken root since the Apache woman had arrived. Breakfast was already in preparation, the children quietly helping with small tasks, laughing together without the chaos that had defined the past 6 months. The rancher paused at the doorway, watching her move with grace and purpose. She seemed to belong here, not in an intrusive way, but as if the ranch and the house had been waiting for her arrival all along. Every gesture, every action she took, radiated calmness and understanding. The rancher realized once again that her presence had done more than lighten the workload. It had transformed the very rhythm of their home. He stepped outside into the warm morning air, joining her as she checked on the animals. The horses greeted her with soft whinnies, the dogs brushed against her legs, and even the chickens moved more calmly under her watchful eye. The rancher felt a profound sense of relief. For the first time in months, he felt that he could face the day without being overwhelmed. Together, they walked the fields, repairing fences, filling water troughs, and checking on the crops. Throughout the morning, the rancher noticed how naturally the children had adapted to her presence. They followed her guidance willingly, helping with chores and learning responsibility without any reminders. Their laughter filled the air, no longer tinged with frustration or tension. The rancher smiled quietly, watching their transformation. Inspiration of her patience, kindness, and gentle authority.
He realized that she had not only been teaching them practical skills, but also modeling respect, cooperation, and care.
As the sun reached its peak, a small challenge arose. One of the younger horses had tangled its lead rope around a post, panicking slightly. The rancher's first instinct was to rush and force the situation. But he paused, watching her approach the horse with quiet confidence. She spoke softly, moving with deliberate calmness, and the horse slowly relaxed. Together, they freed the animal without any harm. The rancher marveled at her skill, not just her knowledge of animals, but her ability to remain steady in a tense situation, to inspire calm rather than fear. After the incident, they took a short break under the shade of a large oak tree. The rancher handed her a cup of water, and they both sat quietly for a moment, listening to the soft rustle of leaves and the distant calls of birds.
I don't know how to put this into words, he said finally. You've changed everything here.
The ranch, the children, even me. I can feel it. Brish.
She looked at him calmly, her eyes steady and warm. You did the hard work, she said.
I only guided what was already here. You cared for this place and your family long before I arrived.
I simply helped it flourish.
Her humility struck him deeply. He realized that her strength lay not in claiming credit, but in quietly offering support and wisdom. He felt a deep respect and gratitude, not only for the help she provided, but for the way she had changed the rhythm of their lives. But the first time in 6 months, he felt hope, peace, and a sense of stability. The afternoon passed in a series of small, fulfilling tasks. The children practiced grooming the horses under her guidance, laughing as they learned. She taught them small lessons about responsibility, patience, and respect for the animals, all without raising her voice. The rancher observed, feeling a mix of pride and relief. The household had become a place of learning, care, and harmony, an environment that he had longed for but had not been able to create alone. As the day drew to a close, the rancher realized that something even deeper was changing within him. The constant tension and anxiety that had plagued him for months were easing. He was no longer overwhelmed by the endless demands of the ranch and children. Instead, he found himself noticing small joys, the way the sunlight reflected off the barn, the sound of children's laughter, the calm breathing of the animals resting in the evening air. Life felt more balanced, and he knew that it was her guidance and presence that had made this possible. That evening, as the children prepared for bed, the rancher watched the Apache woman tuck them in. She spoke softly to each child, offering encouragement, reassurance, and gentle guidance. They responded with affection and trust, hugging her before settling down to sleep. The rancher felt a wave of gratitude and emotion wash over him. For months he had struggled alone, but now he realized that his family was not just surviving, they were thriving. When the house was quiet, he approached her in the kitchen.
"I can't thank you enough," he said, his voice low and sincere.
"Brage, you've done more than I could have ever imagined. Not just for the ranch, but for my children. And for me." She smiled, a small, gentle expression that spoke of understanding and acceptance.
"You did the hard part," she replied. "I only helped you see that strength can be shared."
Life is not meant to be carried alone.
Her words resonated deeply. He realized that the past 6 months had taught him perseverance, but her arrival had taught him humility, trust, and the value of accepting help.
He felt a renewed sense of purpose and confidence, knowing that he could face the future with her guidance and partnership.
Over the following weeks, the ranch settled into a steady, harmonious routine.
The children flourished under her guidance, learning new skills, taking responsibility, and developing confidence. The rancher found himself able to focus on long-term planning, repairing old structures, and improving the land, instead of being consumed by constant reactive tasks, desperation. Together they created a home filled with laughter, care, and cooperation, a home where the children felt safe, valued, and supported.
One afternoon, the rancher found himself standing by the fence, watching her interact with the children.
He noticed the patience in her tone, the care in her movements, and the way she encouraged them without ever demanding. She had transformed not only the household, but also his understanding of leadership and responsibility. He realized that true strength lay not in doing everything alone, but in guiding, supporting, and nurturing those around you.
As the sun began to set, casting a golden glow over the fields, the rancher walked beside her in quiet reflection.
"You've changed my life," he said softly. "I never realized how much I needed help until you arrived. Disparity, now I see that life can be lighter, calmer, happier, but—" She looked at him with her steady, gentle gaze.
"You were already capable," she said. "I only helped you see that you didn't have to bear the weight alone. Together everything is possible." The rancher smiled, feeling a deep sense of gratitude and peace.
For 6 months, he had struggled alone, weighed down by endless responsibilities. But now, with her presence, patience, and wisdom, life felt renewed. The house, the ranch, and the children were thriving. He could finally rest, knowing that he was not alone, and that his family's future was brighter because of the guidance and support she had provided. That night, as the children slept soundly, the rancher reflected on the transformation that had occurred. Her arrival had been quiet and unassuming, yet it had reshaped the entire household. Practical help, but calm, wisdom, and understanding. He realized that her presence had been a gift in every sense, a gift that had restored hope, balance, and joy to his life. In the quiet hours before dawn, he whispered a silent promise to himself, to honor her guidance, to nurture the lessons she had taught, and to ensure that his children grew up surrounded by patience, care, and respect. He understood that life's challenges would continue, but with support, trust, and cooperation, even the heaviest burdens could be shared and overcome. The rancher closed his eyes with a sense of peace he had not known in months. The Apache woman's presence had transformed their lives in ways he could not have imagined. She had arrived quietly, yet her impact was profound. The house was no longer just a place of survival. It had become a home filled with laughter, learning, and love. The ranch, once a source of endless struggle, had become a place of growth, connection, and shared purpose. As he drifted into sleep, he felt gratitude and hope. The past 6 months of struggle had led to a new chapter of life, one in which trust, patience, and support created harmony. He knew that with her by his side, his family could thrive, his ranch could flourish, and his heart could finally rest, knowing that he was not alone. The night was calm, the stars twinkling above the ranch, as if witnessing the quiet triumph of resilience, trust, and the transformative power of guidance and support. Break. Tomorrow and every day after would continue this journey, but now he faced the future with confidence, hope, and a sense of partnership that had been missing for far too long.